office of the President of the United States, we present an address by Dwight D. Eisenhower.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. We must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
And we'll be faced with equally consequential decisions in the 21st century. Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that.
If you have enough data on a person, especially biometric data, and if you have enough computing power, you can understand that person better than the person understands himself or herself. And then you can control this person, manipulate them, and make decisions for them.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants.
People will literally be part of a network. All the bodies, all the brains would be connected together to a network, and you won't be able to survive if you're disconnected from the net.
With AI taking over many of the unskilled and possibly some of the skilled activities, then there will be people for whom seems to be society. It won't have much use for these people.
We need to accept that there will be some pain in the process.
I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online.
Individual carbon footprint tracker.
Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
That's a hostile corporate takeover of your body and a digital surveillance censorship dictatorship.
President Eisenhower tried to warn us about this years ago. The hostile takeover of a scientific,
technological elite.
They provide much more powerful intelligence for decision making.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? You will rule on that.
The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin.
Now that we've cracked the code of life, it will not take much longer before we can start to play God.
The new powers that we are gaining now, especially the powers of biotechnology and artificial intelligence, are really going to transform us into gods.
It's a total, complete AI takeover of every facet of human life, like Harari and others have been saying.
Given all the technological developments, it might be feasible, even easy, to support people, even if they don't work, to give them a universal basic income, to give them enough food, enough medicine, and so forth. The big question is meaning. What will they do all day? And one of the answers is that they will just play computer games all day, virtual reality games. They will spend more and more time playing virtual reality games that will give them much more excitement and emotional engagement than anything in the real world outside.
But what I see is a huge disruption. That is, before we get to the world that Yuval envisaged in his description of the future, there's going to be a complete destabilization of the human condition and of human societies. This is not going to happen quietly.
The Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights is arguably the most revolutionary act of government in all of recorded history. And some Americans seem to think it's a law that allows a citizen to own a firearm for self-protection. That is false. This was true before the American Revolution. All throughout history, there were laws created by the ruling power that allowed certain citizens to carry certain weapons for self-protection. But that's not what the Second Amendment is at all. The Second Amendment officially recognizes the God-given birthright that every American innately possesses: freedom. Every single American, down to the lowest commoner, has the right to arm themselves and constitute themselves in a militia. The Second Amendment does not grant us the right. It stands to protect our natural rights from government. It is the bane of every tyrant and control freak, because before the Second Amendment, only the ruling class had standing armies. The Second Amendment is the only remedy man has ever wielded against a corrupt government, and it can't be taken away or infringed upon unless we fail future generations and allow it, which is already happening. Several states have unlawfully stripped Americans of their birthright and imposed infringements upon gun ownership, which has only increased the amount of gun violence in those areas, because criminals don't obey laws. And even though the Supreme Court recently honored the Second Amendment, our corrupt Congress is working together to infringe upon all Americans. No matter what happened in Uvalde, Texas, we know that the police stood down and allowed it to happen. And after Hollywood dispatched their latest celebrity prostitute with political aspirations to dance on the graves of children, we know why they stood down. Unless you're a brainwashed zombie, it's crystal clear why the government is desperately trying to challenge the Second Amendment. The U.S. government is not only guilty of committing crimes against the American people, they're guilty of committing crimes against humanity and international war crimes. It is in fact the American citizens' duty to remedy the situation and restore the republic. Violence may often be a solution in human affairs, but it is never a good solution, and it requires very little courage to kill, if any at all. And that brings us to the First Amendment. The First Amendment is not nearly as revolutionary as the Second, but it requires more courage to wield. To peacefully stand against evil with your individual voice alone requires great courage. And if enough people were able to muster that courage, then the light of truth would overcome the darkness, and the American people would become a righteous people. This is why the tyrants in Washington, D.C. want to convict Julian Assange under the Espionage Act. They see it as a viable way to circumvent the First Amendment. If they can convict Assange, they can convict Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones and anyone who exposes their corruption. And then what? Immediately following the Supreme Court's decision to recognize the Second Amendment, they overturned Roe v. Wade, another constitutional victory. The tyrants and their pro-abortionists see children as a commodity, a slave, or a piece of property to dispose of as its owner sees fit. But our American birthright applies to every living American. As revolutionary as it may be, the Bill of Rights is nothing more than a lawful remedy that we inherited. It merely recognizes our natural freedom. To actually secure this freedom requires the courage and the will of the people. Our government's job is not to change our Constitution. Their job is to secure it and abide by it, which is what only one Supreme Court judge seems interested in doing. In the recent Supreme Court arguments, the majority of judges expressed their concern that their decision would be used to overturn other recent decisions, specifically constitutional laws pertaining to contraception, sodomy, and gay marriage. And Judge Thomas alone made it clear that these decisions should be overturned. And he's right, because all of these perverse concessions are nothing more than attacks on our Constitution. And if Americans were a serious and righteous people, we would preserve our American birthright for generations to come. This is Greg Reese.
While millions may be waking up to the depopulation agenda, it still continues. And with the war in Ukraine needlessly escalating, with no peace talks being considered at all, it is evident that the Judas goats and their bureaucrat minions think they can kill us all and evade justice for their crimes against humanity. It appears that the United States has sabotaged Russia's Nord Stream 2 fuel pipeline, an act of war reminiscent of the Berlin-Baghdad railway conflict that helped ignite World War I. Early this week, Russia's infamous Doomsday submarine, capable of creating a radioactive tsunami, reportedly disappeared from its base and was spotted days later while operating on the Arctic surface. Photographs in the city of Belgorod appear to show the deployment of the Peresvet mobile laser system, which renders an area invisible to enemy surveillance by blinding surrounding satellites, allowing Russia to secretly mobilize and attack. Retired Brigadier General Kimmett says nukes are on the table.
Look, I think it's fairly simple to lay down the options. It could be the soft side of it, which is doubling down on sanctions, doubling down on export controls, ranging all the way to a nuclear response of our own and everything in between.
Wow. Zelensky says that NATO must preemptively launch nuclear weapons against Russia as a warning. And unhinged Hollywood activist Sean Penn agrees with him.
Well, even countries that have nuclear weapons can remain intimidated to use them, and we're seeing that now with our own country. And I fear what that legacy is going to be. No one wants to see a nuclear conflict. I don't want to see one. Nobody At the same time, if only one bully is going to be able to use those weapons as a threat, we got to rethink what we're doing.
The lunatics in charge are buying up underground bunkers and anti-radiation drugs in hopes they will survive the mass culling agenda that continues on, unhindered. With our government guilty of pushing a deadly, robbing the nation of its wealth, and starting a war with Russia, who has a superior nuclear weapons arsenal, one has to ask, be it angry mobs or atom bombs, where do these crooks plan on escaping the fallout?
Denver is now handing out free bug-out bags to help you just in case you run into emergency. Lisa, all right, I asked you last time. I need to know the checklist of everything I got to put in my bug-out bag.
Toilet paper, paper towels, toilet paper, paper towels. We've got cotton balls, 2 opportunities to get these free emergency preparedness bags. So really an important effort, especially when we're talking about severe weather.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to go and get those bags, but for people who maybe can't make it out there, is there anything in there that's, too tough that you couldn't just put one of those together yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you could easily put together yourself. I mean, if you got any extra cotton balls, paper towels, toilet paper.
The city of Denver is letting the locals know they should be prepared for an unexpected order to get out of town in a hurry. And many people are connecting dots between this and the Denver International Airport. The Denver International Airport has long been rumored to be sitting atop an underground military base built deep beneath the surface and connected to several other underground bases. These rumors are the result of several interesting facts. From 1995 until he was found dead a year later, Phil Schneider gave dozens of lectures claiming to be a geological engineer hired to build deep underground military bases, known as DUMBs, for the U.S. government. His father was Captain Oscar Schneider, a former Nazi stationed in Florida working black operations for naval intelligence. Phil Schneider was showing samples of what he claimed were unknown exotic metals. He provided maps of the underground DUMBs and showed off dramatic scars that he claimed were from a violent skirmish with a non-human species deep underground. In January of 1996, Schneider was found dead in his home, days after he mysteriously died of strangulation. Investigations were never completed, and it was ruled a suicide. His evidence went missing. Before he died, Phil Schneider used his clearance to take investigative author Alex Christopher into the top underground levels of the Denver airport, where they took pictures of a long road heading off to multiple destinations. Built upon 53 square miles of land, 25 miles from downtown, the Denver airport was billions of dollars over budget. Different contractors were hired for each section, some of whom have come forward and claimed it would take days to show you what's down there. Inside the otherwise unimpressive airport, there is a capstone with cryptic Illuminati and Masonic imagery, marking a time capsule buried beneath to be opened in 2094. The airport opened with a famous four-piece mural depicting biological warfare, death and destruction, the surrender of all national sovereignty, and the emergence of a new religion. On the floor, for no apparent reason, is what appears to be the symbol for gold and silver in a mining cart, AUAG, which is also the abbreviation for a deadly strain of hepatitis discovered in 1965. Outside on the surface, the runways form the shape of a swastika, and passengers are greeted by what has become known as Blucifer, a 32-foot horse with glowing red eyes that reportedly killed its creator when a piece of the sculpture came loose and severed an artery in his leg. This is why many people are talking about Denver's bug-out bag program, which is good, because now that we know who the people committing these historic crimes against humanity are, we can't just let them slip away into some hole somewhere. People of the West are being told that Putin is so bad that nuclear war is a reasonable option to get rid of him. And if you think this may be true, I urge you first to take the time to watch Oliver Stone's interview with Vladimir Putin and see for yourself if this one man is worth starting a war over. The mainstream talking point is that Vladimir Putin is a killer because he was in the KGB. But what they won't tell you is that he resigned from the KGB because he did not agree with their methods. He described communism as a blind alley, far away from the mainstream of civilization. He is a patriot of old Russia, the 1,000-year melting pot of many cultures, and for his entire leadership has sought peace with NATO. For a brief moment, it looked as if President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev were going to end the mutual assured destruction arms race between the two countries. But by the time Putin got a seat at the table, the mood had changed. Putin tells us that President Clinton tried persuading him to join the US in leaving the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty of 1972, citing an ambiguous threat from Iran as an excuse.
Президент Клинтон, он, насколько мне известно, представитель демократической партии, без всяких оснований, потому что есть угроза со стороны Ирана.
Putin suggested that if they were to abandon this foundation of arms control, then they should develop a new anti-ballistic agreement.
Я должен сказать, что мы предложили работать над системой противоракетной обороны совместно. Соединенные Штаты, Россия и Европа. В конечном итоге, как это ни печально, наши партнеры от этого предложения отказались.
The United States had other plans, and after 9/11, President Bush announced that the U.S. would withdraw from the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. After doing this, the U.S. then began developing missile systems around Russia's borders.
Это будет означать не что иное, как еще один виток в гонке вооружений.
Putin has been assisting the United States in the war against terror and has seen how the U.S. have been using terrorist groups against Russia.
На мой взгляд, важная вещь. У нас сложилось абсолютно устойчивое мнение тогда, не нам, тогда, что наши партнеры американские на словах говорят о поддержке России, говорят о готовности к сотрудничеству, в том числе в борьбе с терроризмом, а на самом деле используют этих террористов для раскачки внутриполитической ситуации в России.
When U.S.-backed terrorists in Georgia attacked South Ossetia, Russia moved in to defend civilians, and the American media spun it as if Russia was the aggressor. When an overwhelming majority of Crimeans voted to join Russia, the Western media spun it as if Russia had coerced them. In 2012, the U.S. State Department openly meddled in Russia's elections. And in 2014, they orchestrated a violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government in plain view. Early this year, the U.S. State Department threatened to shut down the Nord Stream pipeline.
If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
Followed by President Biden.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
But how will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
And now it appears as if the U.S. has done it, as the State Department brags about it. While NATO desperately seeks world domination, the Russian Foreign Ministry has built an alliance with the majority of the world, an alliance backed by sound money that respects national sovereignty and strives for world peace. At this point, it seems fairly obvious that if Americans don't wake up to the fact that they are no longer the good guys, then they stand to lose all the freedoms that America used to stand for. This is Greg Reese.
We do have some breaking news. There are satellite images, and what they appear to show is rapid construction at several suspected silo fields in China that could eventually launch nuclear weapons. All of this as the country is also significantly bolstering its military capabilities.
CNN has learned that the U.S. is developing contingency plans for possible Russian escalation in its war in Ukraine, including the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons.
The prospect of nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is now back within the realm of possibility.
U.S. Coast Guard spots Chinese guided missile cruiser and Russian naval ships off the Alaskan coast. A patrol boat found 86 miles off the coast of Alaska. 3 Chinese naval ships, including a guided missile cruiser, as well as 4 Russian naval vessels, including a destroyer, spotted in a single battle formation.
I think that Russia and China are working on things behind the scenes, and our leaders are so behind the ball, and our media is so behind that they don't see what's going on.
Instead of calming tensions, in fact, they seem to be deliberately provoking Russia.
Breaking, Zelensky says NATO must, quote, launch preemptive strikes on Russia.
They all believe that defending Ukraine is worth risking Armageddon.
It means the end of the world.